If you love hearing about people who love what they do, then join me for another uplifting story from People with Passion. Welcome everyone to another episode of People with Passion. I'm so delighted today to have someone I really respect in the healing arts with me, James Arnoldi. James, welcome.
Thank you very much.
James, you have a really unique approach to supporting your clients. It's a combination, I understand, of leading edge energetic therapy techniques and therapeutic art. So let's just dive in. I'm really curious to know more. And I know it's your passion. So tell us about what you do. How do you describe it?
So, you put it rightly. I use energy techniques, things like EFT, emotional freedom techniques, also known as tapping, which I know you're very, very familiar with. And that's my principal modality that I use, alongside an original training in the therapeutic arts, which I originally used with children and teenagers. And so principally, I work with people who either have something that they're really wanting to develop in their lives. They might be looking for a different kind of relationship, romantic or platonic. They might be looking for a change in career. Or on the other hand, there might be a situation where a client is looking to work on some past trauma, something that might have even happened in childhood, and that's holding them back from living happy, fulfilled lives. And we work on that together.
Wow, that's fantastic. And it covers a really broad range, really, of things for people. So what do you enjoy most about what you do? I'm always curious about people who love what they do so much as to whether it really is even work at all, or whether it's a version of fun for you.
I think, I think it's interesting, the word fun that you use in your question, because I don't think someone would typically associate something like therapy or coaching necessarily with fun. However, my work is deeply fulfilling, and there are moments of a lot of fun, probably because it's, for me, the most amazing thing about the privilege I have of getting to do is that when I work with people, it's about creating safe spaces for change and making my clients feel safe enough that they can bring about change in their lives. I called my company "How Do You Really Want to Change.org" because that's the question I always start with when I'm working with a client. What is it about your life right now that you love, but also what is it that you might be struggling with or want to change? And creating a safe space to make that change is at the very crux of what I do. And surprisingly, some may find out that, surprisingly for some, moments of change can be hugely revelatory and bring about a huge amount of laughter and fun.
Yeah, that's I love that, and it gets right to the point, doesn't it? It's really, that's what it's all about for most of us. Is things are okay, but there's always things that we're looking to have be better. So I think that's a really powerful jumping off point. And so obviously you've had experience of this over a long period of time. You've been developing your techniques, if you like. So who or what might have been your greatest influences along the way?
So I have to say that I've come into the world of therapy and coaching from a very personal level. I had a very, very difficult time in my teens and early 20s, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I walk the walk. I became interested in therapy and coaching because I needed therapy and coaching, as I went into my adult life. And I come from a background where there's, unfortunately for my family, there's a lot of trauma, a lot of emotional repression, a lot of difficulty. And I was lucky enough in my early 20s to work with a family constellation therapist called Jill Peirce. And family constellation therapy, if you don't know what it is a form of therapy that not only works on personal trauma, stuff that might have happened to you in childhood or later in life, but also works on the premise that when our family members or ancestors have had certain kinds of trauma, if those trauma haven't been resolved, then actually that can be repeated as a pattern through other people's lives. So, something that might happen to your grandparent or even great-grandparent a long, long time ago could be relived through yourself as you're living your life. Which for me was hugely significant because I happen to have a background where, unfortunately for my family, not everyone lived very happy, fulfilled lives. And it was revelatory for me to do this initial bit of therapy in my 20s with Jill Peirce, this family constellation therapist. And she really, although the therapy that I practice with my clients isn't the same, I'm greatly inspired by her work, and I do sometimes, when appropriate, include a kind of, for want of a better phrase, ancestral perspective into my work, if it's relevant.
Yeah. Wow. So, as I think is true for most people, it hasn't all been smooth sailing for you along the way, and this has obviously been a very personal journey. So when you hit some of those, well, for want of a better word, probably trivializing it, some bumps in the road, how did you turn those around?
Well, around the time that I referenced in my 20s, I had very, very poor mental health, and I've, in my life and working with different therapists and then eventually becoming a therapist, I've had to build up my self-esteem from the ground up, just like some of the clients that I work with now. And it's, I guess, I want to use the word faith, and I want to use it lightly because I know faith means a lot of different things for different people. But since when I started having issues or realizing I had issues in my life, I had a kind of lingering sense of faith throughout all of the difficult times, that something was guiding me, that I was going through all of these problems, this emotional difficulty, sometimes going through real emotional lows, but that it had some kind of meaning. And I'm not going to get evangelical on you, Claire, and say that I found the meaning and that I know the meaning of life, but at the very least, it was a life-saving metaphor for me. Having that sense that I was being signposted towards a better life by times of difficulty allowed me to have enough space in my mind to try and find some kind of healing and resolution. And that's often the work that I end up doing with clients, people who feel that they have no hope in their life or they've lost a lot of hope, and actually taking a step back from the situation and saying, well, okay, even if my client doesn't necessarily believe in a God or have a spiritual system per se, necessarily, I like to ask the question of, well, if this stuff that's happening to you right now were to be happening for a reason, what do you think that reason would be? What would this helpful force be trying to show you, despite the fact that you're suffering right now? And that's a hugely empowering question, because certainly for me, and often with the clients I'm working with, it brings one out of a state of victimhood and into a slightly more empowered state of, gosh, actually, maybe I can actually use this situation for my own personal betterment and the betterment of those around me.
Yeah, and that broader perspective, applying that maybe now to your young self, was there any advice that you would have given to him?
Yes. I would hold little James by the hand, and I would say, mate, look, you just want to be loved, and you just want to feel a sense of belonging, just like all of these other people around you. And everyone looks like they know what they're doing and they're confident in themselves, but actually look around you, there aren't that many people who have a really deep sense of belonging and being loved, unfortunately. Just it's the way the world works. And I would say to him, you are loved, and the most important thing is that you love yourself, and that you're always going to get rejected sometimes. You're always going to disappoint people. You're always going to have people who want you to be doing something that you don't want to do. And as a result, I would just say to you, James, go for what you really want to do, because that you're always going to be tested. There are always going to be moments where you don't meet certain people's expectations. And actually, by following what you really want to do, I know it sounds very Disney and cliched, but really, like, I truly believe, like, you've got to go with where your heart's guiding you, because I think it was put really well by Jim Carrey in an interview that he had with a Hollywood producer. He was talking about his father, and his father wanted to be a stand-up comedian, as Jim Carrey became, but his father didn't go for being a stand-up comedian because it was a very precarious career choice. And he went to do something, I'm not sure what he went to become, but anyway, he tried to do something else that was more stable, and he lost his job and he failed at that. And Jim Carrey said, my dad taught me that you can fail at trying to live the life you don't want to live. So why not risk failing at living the life that you do want to live? And
I love that. Yeah.
And I would try and explain that to little James and say, come on, mate, you can do this, and you might fail sometimes, but it's not worse than failing at trying to be something you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I'm going to share a secret with you, Claire. I did that for a long time.
Haven't we all? I hear you. But I mean, these are big topics, and I know that you take your work very seriously and you help a lot of people. But what do you do for fun? You were just citing Jim Carrey there, so I know you've got a great comedic sense, and that you love to laugh. So what do you do for fun?
I don't know whether this was misguided or not, but I actually decided to buy a canal boat 2 years ago. That was out of a sense of fun. It's actually a nightmare sometimes. I'm currently in my kind of therapy space where I do coaching and therapy, and where I also live. So I live on the Kennet and Avon Canal in the west of England, on this canal boat, and it's a great deal of fun. Just living without, when you're not on grid, when you're off grid and you're reliant on finding your own water, getting solar electricity, all of those kind of things, it makes life a lot more fun, but also more stressful sometimes. So that's one of my pet projects, is trying to live a bit of an alternative lifestyle, whilst doing the work that I do with my clients. And it's on the whole hugely fulfilling. I also love learning languages. I speak French and some quite bad Italian and bad Japanese. French is my main language, but I love learning languages and, communicating with people and just developing connection with different people and getting different perspectives.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're on the journey, right? You're on the journey, and you've done a great deal. But you're a young man, do you feel like you're there yet, or is this just the start?
I feel like that's a leading question, Claire. I'm definitely aware of more and more than ever. I'm aware of the fact that the journey. Well, I guess that obviously the journey ends for all of us at some point. However, it's a cliche for a reason, that we're saying it's all about the journey and not about the end. I think it's very, very easy to get fixated on some kind of destination. Living on a canal boat, I can tell you for sure that I'm every 2 weeks when out of lockdown, I'm cruising to a new destination, mooring up with my partner, where we're living in a new environment every 2 weeks, and it's a pleasure to be kind of continually exploring. And I feel that in my work, I feel that in my personal life. I'm, the last year and a bit, we've all been hit by a global pandemic. I've yet to meet someone who has found it easy. I think we've all, we're both therapists. We're helping people to try and develop happier, healthier lives, and even therapists and coaches of this world aren't immune from being in a challenging situation. And I think, for me personally, I've learned such a lot about myself in the last year that I didn't know. When you take away your social connections and you say you can't leave this space for X number of days or weeks, it's super challenging. And
you can't have your hair done. Important things, James.
I mean, look what's going on here. It's just it's really. I would be worried for anyone who hadn't been affected by this year in some kind of, I think we live in a very, at least in the culture, the British culture that I live within, I'd say we're freer than we've ever been. But I also feel like we're in quite an atomized culture that's quite individualistic, for better and for worse. And I think when you combine that with what's happening now with the global pandemic, people are feeling lonely and are feeling isolated. And so it's a good reminder for me as a therapeutic coach, for want of a better phrase, that we're all quite vulnerable and need to look after each other, and communities are super important at this time, even if they're all on Zoom or on social media. So I'm very much aware of the fact that I'm on a journey, and it's on the whole, it's a pleasure to be able to treat that as an exploration rather than a really, there are difficult challenges, of course.
I think you summed that up really well. It is a super challenging time, and it's sort of a micro version, if you like, of probably what we experience every day, but at the moment it's extremely concentrated. So we're probably coming to the end of our chat, but just before we do, I'm really curious to know if you've got any advice, any little gem that you want to leave people with before we wrap up.
I would kind of our discussion just there about COVID and the pandemic. I would just say I want to send a message to anyone who is really struggling right now, because everyone's struggling to a certain degree, but some of you out there are struggling a lot and are really going through a lot of heartache or hardship. And I would just say, and this is from personal experience of past times where I've been really struggling, I would just say, if you are struggling right now, try and differentiate between what you can control and what you can't control. There is a worldwide pandemic that none of us can control as certainly not as individuals, and the difficulty as a collective. And if you can differentiate between what you can't control and you can control, and then just focus on what you can control and make tiny incremental changes to those things that just give you a little bit of relief from what you're going through, then I would really, really ask you to try and do that, because it's not an easy time we're in, and any personal difficulties you might be going through are going to be worsened by the situation we're all going through. So I would ask you to try and find that hope and faith in something better that could come in time.
Great advice, and beautifully said. Really, I really appreciate that, James, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people watching that really connect with that message very deeply. And so I just want to thank you so much for being part of today's interview. Absolute pleasure. It's just lovely to talk to you anytime. And I want everyone to know that, as usual, we will have James's details and contact information below the video. You'll be able to read a little bit more about him and of course, to reach out and connect with him if you'd like to. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, James, and look forward to your company next time on People with Passion.